Back to the Three Rivers podcast here for Wednesday, May 29th, our second podcast of the day. Glad you could join us here on our Oneberg Facebook page, Oneberg YouTube, or maybe you're joining us on our Spotify channel. We're happy to have you along with us to talk more Major League Baseball and about the Pittsburgh Pirates and the start of their season just a little bit over 2 months in. And with that, we welcome our special guest here this afternoon is Mr. John Perrotto, a good friend of mine from way back in the day. Good to see you, John, Major League Baseball insider with Pittsburgh Baseball Now.
Good to see you, Ed. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's been a while. John and I used to work some high school games with Trib Live back in the day. Did a handful of games up in Beaver County, John's neck of the woods, and always had a good time covering football and basketball and talking baseball. And John, I know you're a big MLB guy. You've written about Major League Baseball and here specifically locally about the Pirates for a number of years. Let's get your thoughts. Normally when we get to Memorial Day, that's a good time to, do an initial check-in on a Major League Baseball team such as the Pirates to see where they are. A lot of people say, let's not even talk about it until after Memorial Day till we have a good first 1/3 of the season under the books to kind of judge where they are. But they're 25-29, 4 games under 500 going into this afternoon's doubleheader at Detroit. 6-4 in their last 10 games, though, a little better than what they were going through there for a while. Currently 6 games back in the NL Central behind Milwaukee, the Cubs, and St. Louis. And 12-15 at home, 13-14 away. And they have a negative 29 run differential so far this season. John, your thoughts so far on the 2024 Pittsburgh Pirates?
I think on the whole, probably a tad disappointing. They talked all winter and into spring training about how they were ready to win now and be in contention and everything. And they've showed it at times, but not consistently enough to think that they are going to be a contender this year. And like you said, their 25-29 record, that kind of says it all. That puts them on a pace to go 75-87, which would actually be 1 win less than a year ago. So that would be, I think, a bit of a disappointment if they do finish that way. That being said, there is a long part of the season left, 108 games, and a lot of things can happen. I do think they have some good players. I think now with the pitching staff with Paul Skeens and Jared Jones, who are pitching in the doubleheader today in Detroit, obviously gives them one of the better, if not best, starting rotation in the division now. So, I think there's upside there. I think they could play better, but they do need to be more consistent than they have been during the first third of the season.
A year ago, John, this team got out to a fantastic start during the month of April. Something ridiculous, right? Won the first, 17 of 22 or 23 games, got out way in front. And then they hit a block. They hit better talent, better teams. And the next couple months, by the time we got to the All-Star break, they were finished for the year. This year, a little bit different. They got out to a little bit of a hot start, cooled off, and then it's been a seesaw battle, like you said, a roller coaster of a ride, up and down since. What do you kind of foresee them doing here during the month of June into July up until the All-Star break?
Well, I think pretty much the same. It would appear to me that seems to be kind of who they are, like play well for a few days and play poorly for a few days. But you would like to think that maybe they can be better, and a couple of reasons why. One is they're getting Key Brian Hayes back off the IL, and he's had back problems. And I think really, even before he went on the IL, it was hampering him, especially offensively. So, you'd like to hope that after being out for a couple of weeks, that maybe his back is stronger now, and he'll get back to being the guy who in the second half of last season really started to hit like they had always hoped he would hit when they brought him to the big leagues a few years back. So that gives some reason for hope. You're going to have Skeens now for a regular turn in the rotation. This will be his 4th start coming up with Detroit. It seems like the bullpen is still shaky, but it could stabilize a little. It seems like David Bednar, the closer, his troubles that he had early in the season, he seems to be beyond. And Colin Holderman has done a really good job again, like he did last year in the 8th inning. Right. Now it's a matter of getting Aroldis Chapman, Carmen Mlodzinski, some of those guys on track. And if they can do that, then they do have the makings of a good bullpen. So I think there are reasons to think they could get better, but they do need some things to fall into place. They need Nicky Gonzalez to keep hitting at second base. They need G1 Bay, who can really give them a spark with his speed if he can get on base. But of course, that's the biggest thing, because the old adage, you can't steal first base. So
Right.
he needs to find a way to get on base more consistently. So yeah, I think there's reason to be optimistic they could be better, but not enough concrete reasons to think that for sure they will be better.
John, one glaring spot right now on the offensive side of this lineup is first base, and Rowdy Tellez right now. He's the hot topic here in Pittsburgh. What should they do with Rowdy Tellez, who they brought in during free agency? They were hoping he had a little bit left in the tank. Again, he showed some signs early in the season that he could provide a spark, but that's fizzled out to hardly anything now. He's really struggled at the first base position. Two-part question for you. What do you think they should do with Rowdy Tellez, and what do you think they will do with Tellez?
Well, I think it's to the point where they need to move on from Rowdy Tellez. I mean, it's not early in the season. It's certainly not late, but it's a third of the season has gone by. His slugging percentage is, I believe, 225. He has a higher on base percentage than a slugging percentage, which that profiles more as like a light hitting shortstop than a power hitting first baseman. And it just seems his at-bats keep getting worse and worse and worse instead of getting any better. And, I know the guy puts the time in. You see him out there early for early batting practice before, the regular batting practice takes place before games. And, I don't think it's a lack of effort. I just think he's just struggling. And, he's 29, so it's a little baffling. You wouldn't think he would be going over the hill at this point, but for whatever reason, it just doesn't seem it's going to work out. But I don't think they will release him anytime soon because of the fact he's making $3.2 million. And it's like, gosh darn it, we're going to get our money's worth, even if it means he's doing nothing. So
Right.
I don't think they're going to be in a hurry to release him. Perhaps I'll be wrong. Maybe you will have a change of heart. But I will say this: Connor Joe has started 9 of the last 12 games at first base, and I think Connor Joe. I don't know if he's your prototypical first baseman in the major leagues with his production, but he certainly has outproduced Tellez, and fairly is getting more playing time, which is very just because he's played much better.
Do you think there's any other options at that first base position right now in the minor leagues for the Pirates?
They really don't have any first base products or prospects, I should say, even going down to the lower levels. They have Jake Lamb at AAA, and now, Lamb was an all-star for the Diamondbacks, but that was 8 years ago now, and he's really become a journeyman and more like a AAA journeyman. But he is hitting over 340. He's showing some power. And at some point, I think you have to reward guys like that if they're having great years in the minor leagues. I think it's twofold, Ed. One, they deserve it personally to come up and show what they can do in the big leagues. And secondly, I think it sends a good message to everybody in the minor leagues, where it doesn't matter if you're a top prospect or if you're just another guy who maybe most people outside the hardcore fans don't even know your name, that if you perform well and very well, that you're going to get a chance to be promoted. And I really think it would send a good message if they called Jake Lamb up. Whether or not Jake Lamb would be the answer to their problems, I don't know at age 33, but I think it wouldn't hurt.
We're talking with John Perrotto of Pittsburgh Baseball Now, our MLB insider, joining us here this afternoon here on One Berg and on the Three Rivers podcast. Glad you could join us here on YouTube, Facebook, or on our Spotify channel. John, you mentioned Skeens a little bit ago. Let's talk about the pitching. Really 3 powerhouses now that has turned into on this staff with Mitch Keller, who again was out to a slow start, but has really come on as of late. 6-3 in his last 6-3 in 11 games. 3.59 ERA, 58 strikeouts. But Jared Jones, who kind of came out of nowhere, I think no one expected Jones to have the type of success that he's had so far this season. 3-4 in 10 games, but that doesn't really tell you a lot because he didn't get a lot of run support, especially early in the season in those losses. 3.05 ERA, 68 strikeouts. And of course, Paul Skeens, 1-0 in 3 games. He'll make his 4th start today. As you mentioned, 2.25 ERA, 21 strikeouts. He's been incredible in his first 3 games with the Pirates. But Skeens, Jones, and Keller, man, those are 3 excellent pitchers that this staff is starting to develop and turn into.
Yeah, and the heartening part about it is they are all homegrown players. They were drafted and developed by the Pirates, and we've seen the Pirates have problems developing pitchers over the years, so that's a good sign. And the pitchers they do develop to go on to other teams seem to do a lot better once they leave Pittsburgh. So we'll see how this works out, but certainly 3 very good pitchers to build around. And I don't want to throw Bailey Falter into that mix exactly just yet, but he does seem to have turned a corner, the left-hander they got from Philadelphia. So right now they have 4 starting pitchers who can go out and keep, at least at the very minimum, keep you in the game on a bad day and dominate on a good day. And that's quite an advantage to have, because there aren't many teams in the major leagues that have 4 guys like that. And, I know Martin Perez was hurt and went on the IL yesterday, but, even Quinn Priester, who's back at AAA and presumably will be called up when the next turn in the rotation comes up, he looked better. Yeah, I mean, he struggled as a rookie last year, and technically he's still a rookie, but he looked better when his 4 or 5 starts he made when he was up in the big leagues earlier this season. So they really could have a really solid rotation 1 through 5. And, I know it's the oldest cliche in baseball that pitching wins championships, but it really, really does. And if you have that kind of pitching, and if you have just even a decent offense, it gives you a chance to be really good.
Absolutely. Pitching, much like defense in football wins championships, pitching in baseball wins those championships as well, as you mentioned. And the Pirates have 3. And as you mentioned, Bailey, too. He's been strong throughout the year, being that 4th option in that rotation. Hey, I want to talk about Paul Skeens with you a little bit, John. Did the Pirates get this right with the call-up in mid-May? Everybody was barking during spring training and when he didn't make the opening season roster. The only reason why he didn't was because of a contract situation. They didn't want to pay him until mid-June, until that clock would start to tick on his Major League Baseball contract. But yet, in middle of May, they do decide to bring him up early. Why not just start the season with Paul Skeens right out of the gate? Did they get that right? Was the timing right? Was it a contract issue? What do you know?
Well, I think they had a plan. I don't know if I necessarily agree with how they handled it, but they had a plan where they wanted to build him up. They wanted to start from pitching 3 innings in the first couple starts, have a week off between starts, and then steadily increase the innings limit and the days off between starting, to where by the time they reach their kind of program for or plan or whatever you want to call it for him, that he would be ready to step in and pitch every 5 days and be able to be in that regular pro routine. Whereas in college, he only pitched 1 day a week. So I was not a fan of it. I figured if the guy's pitching well, why not have him pitch in the big leagues? But through 3 starts, you can't really complain that, it does look like their plan worked out. And even Ben Cherington, the general manager, admitted that, that you never know for sure when you try to develop these pitchers exactly what routine will work. But it does seem like they did hit on a routine that really had Skeens ready to hit the ground running once he got here. And, I know people, including myself, wanted him here earlier, but it looks like the Pirates had it planned out just right, to the way it's turned out to this point.
Yeah, so far so good. He has looked incredible in his 3 games so far this season. His 4th will be this evening. The Pirates rained out last night in Detroit. We'll play a doubleheader. We'll be getting started probably in about 10 minutes for game 1, and you'll have Jared Jones going in the first game this afternoon at 12:40, followed by Paul Skeens right after in game 2 of that doubleheader. So if you like Pirates baseball and you like pitching in particular, today's a good day to sit in front of the television and watch 2 games back to back. Hey, John, we talked about pitching, we talked about offense with the Pirates, talked about where they're going to go from here. One other question for you, and I want to move on to a couple other subjects while we still have you on here on the program here this afternoon. Derek Shelton, the manager. So far, what's your thoughts on Derek Shelton and the job that he's done as the manager for this team?
I think, it's kind of a complicated question to answer. I mean, or it's not a complicated question, but it's complicated. It's a complicated answer on my part, is what I'm trying to
Right,
say.
right.
He came in here with a bad team, and then he had COVID. He didn't get hired until late in November after the 2018 season. So he got a late jump on the off season, a late jump on getting to know his players, making calls, going to visit them. And then he got the spring training, and spring training got shortened because of COVID before they could get a full spring training in. And then they were in limbo for months about when the season could start. And then it didn't start until late June or July, I should say. And it was a 60-game sprint. And the way the protocols were, the players were separated into two clubhouses. And it was just a very weird year. And even into 2021, it still was, the after effects. You had to be careful of how much you used your pitchers, because they didn't use pitchers, didn't throw that many innings in this 60-game season the year before. And then you had the lockout in 22, which delayed the start of spring training. So really, until last year and this year, he never really had a normal spring training to be with his team and bond with his guys. That being said, I think, he's done a good job in the fact that even when they had really bad teams, they hustled, they tried. And it's real easy when you're losing 100 games like they did in back-to-back seasons to kind of give up on the season and quit trying. But this year, now that there's expectations, I mean, he's left himself open to some questions with the way he's handled the bullpen, with the way he's stuck with Tellez for as long as he did. And now I admit there's an open question, and I realize this isn't always a great indicator, but you start to hear a smattering of boos every night at PNC Park when his name is introduced with the starting lineups. And I get the feeling some fans are starting to lose patience with Derek, and it would be interesting to see. I mean, they talked about improving. Say they fall back a few games, say they only win 69 or 71 games. It'll be interesting to see whether he's retained or they decide they need somebody else to take them to the next level.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is not an easy job in Major League Baseball, right? It's probably one of the hardest given, what they spend on the roster, but they do have, pretty good draft picks every year, and they've had some good ones over the years. They've had some misses too. But regardless, people want results, and Pirate fans want results, and they want better results. And I always chuckle when every year it's like, oh, we're going to go out, we're going to make the playoffs, we're going to win a championship. And I understand that's the ultimate goal, but how about just finishing above 500 for one season, and taking a next step, and then another step the season after that, and slowly build it up? I just don't like this. Let's just go for everything and anything every single season instead of just trying to build it up.
Yeah, I agree. And if you're going to go for it every season, then go for it. Not sign these
Right.
1-year bandage guys who are on the downside of their careers. I mean, what they're hoping is they sign 5 or 6 players like that and catch lightning in a bottle, and all 5 of them have bounce back years or that one good year left in their career. I mean, if they want to build it up and go outside and sign guys, then they need to sign guys who can be here for the long term. And if not, I'm with you. Just continue to keep building it up from within. Because, I mean, let's face it, as long as Bob Nutting's the owner, and it's not always Bob McClatchy didn't spend a lot of money. The Galbraiths, even when the Pirates won back in the day, they didn't spend a whole lot of money on free agents. And,
Right.
this just isn't a franchise that's going to outspend everyone else, whether, it's being cheap or maybe they don't truly have the money. So I think you do need to build from in the farm system and making small trades for younger guys, though, not older guys, maybe young guys blocked in another organization, or hit the waiver wire and hope that maybe you find that diamond in the rough who didn't work out in one organization and you can turn into another. But but it just it's wearisome after a while. If every year their free agent strategies, let's go sign guys on the cheap and hope, and a
Yep.
lot of times hope against hope that they still have something left.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you there. We're talking with John Perrotto of Pittsburgh Baseball Now, our Major League Baseball insider here on the One Berg Three Rivers podcast. Glad you could join us here this afternoon. Hey, John, you had a good column over the weekend. The Pirates celebrated their 1979 World Series team, and of course, it was Dave Parker bobblehead night this past weekend, this past Saturday. They brought Parker back in and some of the other players from that 79 team. Hard to think that was 45 years ago that they're celebrating this season. But, talk a little bit about your column that you wrote about Dave Parker and about that 79 World Series team.
Yeah, I wrote about it. It was a happy day in a lot of ways. I mean, because you celebrate the last World Series team of the Pirates, and it's fun to see those guys again and talk to them about that season and back in the day they played. But it's a little bit of a sad day too for a couple of reasons. One, Dave Parker is not doing well. He has Parkinson's disease, and even though his mind is sharp, it has really taken its toll physically on him, and he is now wheelchair bound. And Ed, as you know, everybody remembers him as a player, as the big strapping 6'6", 250 guy who could hit for power and run like a deer and throw like no one else from right field. So it's hard to see somebody like that who was a larger than life figure be stricken with this terrible disease and really change things. And the other sad part is, you talk to the players and you say, wow, can you believe it's 45 years? And like you said, everyone goes, no, it's hard. But like John Candelaria told me and a couple other people, he said, it's sure it sure doesn't seem like a very long time since we won, but it sure seems like a hell of a long time since we won another World Series, because it seems interminable 45 years without getting back to the World Series. And, so I think it's a mixture. I think some of the current day players are not up really happy with the way the current Pirates operate, how they don't really put an emphasis on winning. So I said, again, it's a happy day to see everybody, to remember that year. But then it's a sad day to think that nothing's happened since then, hardly, for 45 years now.
Yeah, and like you said, that's the last time the Pirates were back in the World Series. Of
Yeah.
course, they had the three teams in the early '90s with Bonds and Bonilla and Leland and Van Slyke and all those guys that got close a couple times there during that stretch, but never made it to the World Series. And then most recently, the 3-year playoffs. Back during the 2013, 2014, 2015 seasons, they didn't even get past the first round. Got past that wild card round, and that was it. So. Yeah, it's been 45 years since they've been to a World Series, let alone win one. But one thing is certain, I think you see it, whether it's on these fan forums, things that you write, on the radio, watching TV, whatever. Pittsburgh loves baseball, and they love the Pirates. And, if they could just get back to that type of level, a playoff winning level, this town's going to explode.
I mean, you look back to, and it's hard to believe already, they could say the glory days, but it has been 10, 11 years now. 13, 14, and 15. They didn't win the division, but they got in the wild card game every year. And the ballpark was packed on weekends. And even on weeknights in the summer, there were good crowds, 25, 28,000. People just want a good team. I mean, I think people in Pittsburgh realize that they're never going to spend to the level of the Dodgers or the Yankees or the Phillies or the Red Sox. And that's okay. But if they at least try to put their best foot forward and try as much as they can to win, and they do win, people will show up at the ballpark. And I really thought after that run of 13, 14, and 15, when the ballpark was filled so many nights or close to capacity. The whole North Shore there was packed, the restaurants, the hotels, the bars, everything there on around the two stadiums. I thought maybe Bob Nutting would look at that and go, hey, one, this is pretty cool what happens when you win. And two, and this always should strike Bob more than anything, knowing his reputation, when you win, you sell more tickets, you sell more merchandise, and you make more money. But I don't know. Like Garrett Cole told me once, he said, when I gave up that 2-run homer to Kyle Schwarber in the first inning of the 2015 wild card game, that was the end of the Pirates as we knew it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was that was the end of that playoff run, and unfortunately for the Pirates, the end of that 3-year stretch that they were starting to move the needle a little bit. And now, John, you look back, that's going to be 10 years next year since the last time that they went in the playoffs. Just like that, a snap of your fingers, and it's a 10-year playoff drought for this team. You're kind of back to where you were prior to that. From when they were in the early 90s and that playoff drought to that period. So the team is definitely trying to get back there. They got some strong pitching in place now. And as you said earlier here in the podcast, just need to move some of those pieces of that offensive puzzle around and find a few more solutions. John, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Major League Baseball today made an announcement that the Negro League stats are now going to be into the Major League Baseball record books. They're adding them, about 2,300 players added into the record books. The most significant one for us here locally is Josh Gibson, who played for the Homestead Grays, batted .466 in the 1943 season. How about that? But he now surpasses Ty Cobb with a career batting average of .372 and then a slugging percentage of .718. He passes Babe Ruth, who had a career best slugging percentage of .690. Josh Gibson, how about that? He is now in the Major League Baseball record books.
Well, everything that anyone's ever told me that saw him play, and of course his numbers, that they felt he was right there among the all-time greats. And the only reason he wasn't recognized that way because of playing in the Negro Leagues. And a lot of it was the fact that the statistics were either haphazard or not kept well, and it was hard to find results. They didn't have official statisticians like they do in the major leagues. So, I'll give this committee that put this together, the Negro League statistics, they painstakingly went through box scores and newspapers and microfilm. And, they did a really good job of figuring out exactly how well these guys performed. And it's still incomplete to an extent. There still aren't complete records of all Negro League games. So Josh Gibson's home run total is only 268, but a lot of people think that could rise as more information is available. But these numbers that he put up just clearly show the anecdotal evidence over the years of what a great player he was. And not just an all or nothing slugger. He was a home run hitter, but he hit for average. He hit for power, and he got on base at an amazing clip. And it's good to see these guys finally recognized, because I think for years they've been like mythical creatures in a way. It's like, well, this guy, we heard he was great and he hit 380, but what did 380 mean in context of the league? And now they've been legitimized that these guys did play in a real professional baseball league. And the people at the time that saw them, and there aren't a whole lot of people left, but people I talked to when I was younger always said these guys were legitimate and they could have played in the big leagues. This wasn't like a AA or AAA league. This was the equivalent of a big league and a major league. And I'm glad they're being recognized as such. Unfortunately, it comes a long time after almost all of the Negro Leagues players have passed away, but it's good to be able to preserve their memory and once and for all put into context just how good they were.
Yeah, absolutely. Major League Baseball making that announcement this morning. And like I said, 2,300 players added into the MLB record books. And you mentioned the research that had to be done behind the scenes to get that data correctly in place. And they're still working on it, like you said. And I've heard the same thing, that Josh Gibson's stats might get bigger and better, and he could be moving up in a lot of other categories as well. Hey, John, we have a couple more minutes left with you. I know you're a Beaver County guy, so I have to ask you about this. And I know you and I have covered some WPIAL football in the past. Aliquippa was supposed to move up to 5A, giving their success that they've had over the years in football. Now the courts have ruled just last week that Aliquippa will be staying in 4A to compete going forward. Wanted to get your thoughts on that, being the Beaver County guy that you are.
Well, I'm happy for Aliquippa, and I understand the PIAA rule and how they want the competitive balance and have the really good teams that win year after year move up. But I thought in Aliquippa's case, it was kind of unfair. At one point, Mike Warfield, their coach, said they counted 21 of their players as transfers, which was not the case. They had 4 kids transfer. And I will say this about Aliquippa. I mean, obviously, it's a poor city, and you have a lot of instability where kids move a lot because of their economic status, or a lot of times end up being raised by grandparents or aunts and uncles or older brothers and sisters, and they are forced to move to have a place to have a roof over their head. And I
Right.
don't think in a lot of cases, now I'm not saying every case, I mean there are some, I'm sure, that were football related reasons, but a lot of these kids really have no choice. They kind of get passed around, and they have to move and go where they can afford housing. And I just think a lot of it's jealousy. Aliquippa keeps moving up, and they keep winning, and I have no doubt they would have won in 5A too, because of just the way the talent, and more than the talent, the makeup of those kids, and the toughness, and having great coaching of Mike Warfield. But I am happy to see that. You see a school like Southern Columbia, who dominates in Double A year after year. They never have to move up. And I've been in the Southern Columbia School District, and it truly is all farmland. Their high school is in the middle of a cornfield, and that's not an exaggeration. So it's not like kids are going to just growing up in that community. It's obvious kids are moving there for football reasons too, but yet they never get moved up. And Aliquippa seems to constantly get moved up. And there's this fallacy that all their players are transfers, and some of them are, but it's not like they're recruiting a Beaver County All-Star team. A lot of the kids that move back and forth out of that district have no choice because of unfortunately, their economic background and their family background. So I was glad they brought some sense to it. The courts ruled in favor of Aliquippa. And people forget, they really should be single A. They shouldn't even be
Right.
quad A. And
Yep.
for them to just continually win year after year, WPIL championships, state championships, I think what this has done, these rulings, has really is disparaged what Aliquippa has done. I think if you look at it objectively, you have kids from a very small town with a very small population base winning against schools that are hugely bigger than them, and not only player wise, but facility wise, support wise, just what Aliquippa does against them is a tremendous feat. And it hurts me because I've covered many Aliquippa games over the years, and know the people in Aliquippa. That it hurts me that they get punished for having such a good program.
Right, right, absolutely. You bring up a good point too about the transfer part of this conversation, and kids simply just moving because they have to move. It's their family or housing situation within that district. I had a chance to do the first game last year at the new renovated Pitt Heinz Field, and man, was that awesome! Great atmosphere. Have you been to the new facility yet? Now,
I have not. I wanted to get there last year, and I heard it's beautiful, and I'm happy because the old stadium, Ashman Stadium, was a truly a very tough place for visiting teams to come in. The way the seating is, where you walk down into the
Right.
seats, and they called it the pit, and it really was a pit, and it is an intimidating place to play when they came out with the horse and the spear. And
Yeah.
I think Aliquippa, I'm really looking forward. And like I said, I regretfully didn't get the chance to see one of their home games this year, but I definitely want to make it out, this upcoming season, and see the stadium, because everybody that I've talked to that's been there has just raved about it.
It is outstanding. It was 6,000 standing room only the night we were there. You couldn't even move. And talk about an intimidating place to play. It's still very intimidating to go into Aliquippa and try to beat the Clips on their own home turf. But they'll be staying in 4A, which is good news for that community. And I agree with you. The right decision by the court, and the right decision to keep them right there going forward. John, thank you for coming on the podcast. That's going to do it. Appreciate you dropping by, and would love to have you on again to talk more baseball and more Beaver County sports.
Anytime, Ed. It was good to talk with you again. Let's not be strangers this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, hang on. Don't fall off yet. Want to talk to you here off the air. That's going to do it for our Three Rivers podcast for this week. John Perrotto of Pittsburgh Baseball Now. Make sure you log on and catch all of his excellent Major League Baseball coverage throughout the year, including the Pittsburgh Pirates. Next week here on the Three Rivers podcast, next Wednesday, another two-show. We're going to have Brandon Short on again. He was on earlier this year with us, the former McKeesport linebacker and Penn State linebacker. Is going to come back on the show to talk some Penn State football with us. And also Matt Humbert, the Bell Vernon area head football coach, back-to-back state titles in Class 3A, will be joining us on the broadcast next week. We will see you then right here on the Three